Hello, and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 78, Friday, July 29th, 2022.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and...
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back. I'm your host, Courtney, and I am joined, as always, by the Tom Sawyer to my Huckleberry Finn, my lovely co-host, Emily.
Hey, Courtney. Hey, listeners. Good to have you back. Anyone want to pay an offense?
I think there's one over at Walt Disney World that still needs finishing over on Tom Sawyer Island there. So that ties to our next Disney legend. As we shared in June, it's an annual tradition on our show to celebrate summer reading and focus on a theme for 3 to 4 months. And this summer, you, our listeners, picked the theme of Disney Legend Memoirs. We've titled it our Legendary Summer Series, and last month we read and discussed Forever Young by Haley Mills. Our July selection takes us to the theme park and to Tom Sawyer Island. For this prestigious award winner, we are honoring Tom Nabbe, the author of From Disneyland's Tom Sawyer to Disney Legend, The Adventures of Tom Nabbe. So I have once again consulted our favorite reference, Disney A to Z, to see what this text had to say about Tom, and he was in there. Here is his entry. Quote, Nabbe Tom. As Disneyland's youngest cast member, he began work there in July 1955 as a newsie on Main Street before being selected by Walt Disney to portray Tom Sawyer on Tom Sawyer Island in 1956. Later, he worked on attractions, transferring to Walt Disney World in 1971. He retired in 2003 as manager of distribution services for the Florida resort. He was named a Disney legend in 2005. End quote.
So he had quite a career, and I'm so glad that he wrote it down. So the book From Disneyland's Tom Sawyer to Disneyland, The Adventures of Tom Nabbe by Tom Nabbe was published by one of our familiar independent press publishers on the show, Theme Park Press. And this came out in September of 2015. So while a little bit older, 6-year book, it's still a very fresh story. And we've seen the story pop up on some other podcasts and people talking about him, especially with a lot of anniversaries. He tends to show up. Disney Plus bringing back a lot of Imagineers and workers. So it's a name that people might be familiar with, but if you're not, you're going to be at the end of this podcast.
Yeah. What were your overall impressions of the book? Let's talk about the format, the voice, the pacing.
I had a great pace. So it's a short book, only about 115 pages. And the chapters are short. He keeps it pretty succinct of like, this is the title of the chapter is like, My First Year in Walt Disney World. And it's a good 3 or 4 pages about his first year in Walt Disney World. But it reminded me of actually sitting down with my grandfather when I used to ask him stories about growing up. And that's the way it reads to me, is that it sounds very oral history. It kind of reminded me of It's Kind of a Cute Story that we read.
Crump.
Yes, that it's very much it's his voice talking to you and just telling you his story. So it's a very pleasant read.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I appreciated the length, as this has been a very busy month for me. So I was able to get through it quickly. That makes it, I think, a nice summer read, as you said, easy to pick up, put down when needed because of the short chapters within it. And I also agree with you regarding his voice. Like, I pictured him being like, all right, I'm going to sit down I'm assuming he's typing at a computer. I'm going to sit down at my computer and think about this memory and just jot it down. Here it is. I liked the efficiency of it. He was leaning in on one of Disney's 5 keys, efficiency there.
Yeah, and I think what prompted this from some things that I read online and some podcasts I've listened to is that he still continues to share his story So he talks about how he goes around and they invite him back to Disney events to share his story with cast members, or other places that he speaks, Disney conventions and whatnot. And I think it just was a point where he's like, people ask me about my story a lot, so I'm going to just write it down, which I'm glad he did. It's so nice to have these stories, because we do hear a lot about Nine Old Men, Mary Blair, like some of these really big names that just are always getting a lot of attention. And I really like reading about a Disney legend that while super interesting, we're going to talk about him as Tom Sawyer, like that's such an incredible once in a lifetime, no other cast members get to do this kind of story. He's also someone who worked mostly behind the scenes. So, and that's what got him, I think, his Disney Legend Award more so, is all of the stuff he ended up doing for the theme parks beyond Tom Sawyer. So that was cool getting to hear his story.
I think now, looking at the theme park press website, this might be our first biography, or autobiography, I should specify there, from theme park press. We've certainly read Jim Korkis's trivia books. We read Matthew Hodges' Cool Cats and Hot Mouse about jazz and Disney, the one about expired attractions by Christopher Smith. Like they're all, we are fans of theme park press. They fit our niche very well. The Story Comes Alive with Trisha Dabb, but these were all books about Disney from a research perspective. I'm pretty sure this is the first autobiography we've done, so that was nice. I mean, it feels like we've read so many they kind of put together, but I am scrolling through the website and I really think that is fact.
I'm glad you made that connection. And I like that he also included a lot of pictures. So the book's kind of divided into thirds, and there's like a group of pictures, like 2 or 3 pages of photos in between. So that was also like a nice break. So when I was reading, I was like, oh, I read it over 3 days and I just read it in thirds. I was like, I'm going to go up to the first set of pictures, the next set of pictures. And that was about 40 pages a day.
I love pictures in books and autobiographies. Like we have that in Haley Mills as well. I don't know. There's always, it feels like, there's certain iconic pictures that you've probably seen before. Like I posted on our Instagram, the one of him sitting with Walt. I had definitely seen that. But some of his later just felt like these are from his personal photo albums when he and his wife, went to Disneyland for the 50th because he was being honored there. This dude just went through his photo albums and was like, I like these. And it felt very intimate in that regard.
Yeah, so I did really enjoy that. So we're going to talk about his start first in Disneyland as Tom Sawyer. So I just want to ask, Courtney, have you read The Adventures of Tom Sawyer?
It's been years. But yes, I read it in 6th grade. And then I read Huckleberry Finn in 11th grade. Have not revisited, but I think I remember enough.
Same. I read, it was either late high school or early college when I entered my classics phase, where I was like, I'm only going to read Barnes & Noble, like literary classics. And I have a whole shelf now of Barnes & Noble classics because I like how they print them. So I read them probably, though, that's close to 10 years ago now. So I don't remember absolutely everything, but I say that because I feel like, especially like students today in my high school, they are not reading Tom Sawyer, whereas this might have been like a very standard book that maybe my parents read in high school as like part of their English class. Like I think students read shorter pieces now by Mark Twain, like short stories or something, not like the whole book. English has really shifted a lot to be more inclusive, to have a lot more voices, which is great. But that can mean that when you get to Tom Sawyer Island, we might have this whole new generation that goes, who's Tom Sawyer? And not know who that is. So I'm hoping that we can have a brief discussion real quick about Tom Sawyer, because he gets hired. When he hears, we said he's a newsie. I loved the fact that he was a newspaper boy, that connection, I think, to Walt. And he said that in some other interviews that I've listened to and read, that he felt that Walt took some sympathized with him and like took the time with him because he saw himself. Walt was a newspaper boy as well. But then he gets asked he's told by, was it Dick Nunes? Who was like, oh, they're building a Tom Sawyer Island.
I think it might have been.
They're building a Tom Sawyer Island. You kind of remind me of that character. You should ask Walt for a job. And Tom Nabbe goes, you're right, I should. Like the gumption of this 12-year-old that's like, I'm going to ask for a job from Walt Disney while he's in the park. Fantastic. But he does get hired. So I kind of want to compare Tom and Tom. So I went to SparkNotes so that we could all have a little bit of grounding here. Maybe you remember SparkNotes from your high school English days. So here's one of their descriptions of Tom. So you know how like SparkNotes, you could go like, here's their one page about this character. So here's one piece that they have. When the novel begins, Tom is a mischievous child who envies Huck Finn's lazy lifestyle and freedom. As Tom's adventures proceed, however, critical moments show Tom moving away from his childhood concerns and making mature, responsible decisions. These moments include Tom's testimony at Muff Potter's trial, his saving of Becky from punishment, and his heroic navigation of the cave. By the end of the novel, Tom is coaxing Huck into staying at Widow Douglas's, urging his friend to accept tight collars, Sunday school, and good table manners. He is no longer a disobedient character undermining the adult order, but a defender of responsibility and respectability. At the end, growing up for Tom means embracing social custom and sacrificing the freedoms of childhood. End quote. So that's the description from SparkNotes about Tom Sawyer and his character arc in the film. In the book.
I mean, Tom and Huck was a great movie with JTT.
Great film. Yeah. 90s. Love it. So do you see any parallels? Tom was told, you look like Tom Sawyer. He gets hired for Tom Sawyer. Do you see any parallels between Tom Nabbe and Tom Sawyer in this regard?
I do. In the quote where you said respectability and responsibility, I felt that was something that was really drilled into him by Walt, that, you have a responsibility to these guests. I don't want a kid who's running off for a Diet Coke break every 15 minutes, or I think he said for a Coke and a hot dog. And Walt required him to maintain good grades in school, and he had to bring in his report card to Dick Nunis every quarter. So the responsibility piece of your quote is what stuck out to me there, with him sharing the report card stories.
It also resonated with me in the fact that Tom Nabbe talks in that earlier part of the book that he did grow up pretty quickly. So he also starts selling newspapers, not only because he wanted to be close to Disneyland, but he was being supported by a single mom and with brothers and sisters. So they all had to do their part. And so he would sell newspapers. And then he was like, oh, I can get a job here. And then he worked throughout high school. He moved out by 18. So he did kind of grow up quickly. And he remarks, I'm surrounded by childhood every day, but I was very quickly becoming an adult, to paraphrase one of his lines. So I see that here too with Tom Sawyer of, there's so many great things about childhood, but then you hit those moments where you learn these are some new things I have to do to grow up and be an adult.
Yeah, and him sacrificing the freedoms of childhood, as you said, with those responsibilities. And also I see kind of the mentorship element as well, because eventually he ages out of playing Tom Sawyer and Disneyland hires another kid to play him for the next few years, which was interesting. We got a little appendix.
Yeah, that was cool.
From him. I was like, oh, bonus feature.
Yeah, Keith Murdoch was the next Tom Sawyer.
Mentored Keith Murdoch. It's the making mature and responsible decisions. I feel like he then instilled that in Keith, and Keith really looked up to him as an older brother type.
I did find it funny, though, that as much as he was told, you look like Tom Sawyer, I admire he read the books. He's like, if I'm going to embody this character as a former entertainment cast member, I was very pleased that he said, I went and I read the books. And he's like, I think I look more like Huck, who's
the redhead, whereas
Tom is more like blonde hair, not as many freckles. He's like, but I respond to both, and it's fine.
Yes, he said people would call him Tom or call him Huck, and he's like, I'm whoever you want me to be in this.
Yeah, they're both representing. What do you say? As long as you don't call me Becky, we're in good shape. That was great.
Very clever.
So yeah, that I thought was really cool. I thought that was interesting that I was thinking about he's Tom Nabbe, but also Tom Sawyer. And I thought there were actually a lot of parallels there.
Well, Tom Sawyer is partially where his Disney journey began, but as we've shared in qualifying for the Disney Legend Award, he had quite the career. He shared about being present at the opening day of Disneyland as a guest, at Walt Disney World as a cast member, and he, of course, worked on opening Epcot and Disneyland Paris as well. Did you have a favorite opening day story among those?
I think Disneyland opening day is my favorite, just because we hear so much about that crazy day of everything breaking down. But what's cool was he was a guest on that day. And I liked hearing actually his stories of watching Disneyland be built because he lived locally. So he saw like the TWA rocket come in. He saw them building the park before the berm went up, and he said he and his friends used to like sneak under the fence to like go take a peek at things and ride the mules as they were trying to train them and bring stuff in and out of the parks. And I thought that was such a cool perspective because I feel like before, things we read about opening day of Disneyland were always from Imagineer perspectives or a researcher perspective, but here's one from someone who actually went.
A child
who went, right. And they got their tickets. He said he and his mom didn't have tickets. His mom was, loved Hollywood. She brought her autograph book there to catch any celebrity she could to add to her collection. And one of his name's escaping me. He was a comedian.
I can't remember either.
I'll try to flip through. He came out and was like, oh, he was really nice, he said, and signed his mom's autograph book and then said, hey, do you want to, Danny Thomas. And then said, do you want my extra tickets? And they went in, and I loved hearing from him that he's like, everything was broken down by that point, but I didn't care. It was great. And he went back the next day and he's like, and it was wonderful. Everything was repaired and the crowds were gone.
And that was the only time he ever paid to get into a Disney park, because after that, he started selling newspapers.
And then working for them.
Right. So he got to go in selling the newspapers and then working as Tom Sawyer and continuing all around the world. I did like the Disneyland story the best as well because of that unique perspective of being a child there on opening day. But in the vein of picking a different one than you, I will select Walt Disney World. And this is, I think, a pre-opening ceremony. So at this point, Tom is in charge of the monorail system. And he shares kind of this miracle that occurs with the filming and Bob Hope. So I think I enjoyed reading that because I knew exactly what he was talking about, having watched on YouTube the Walt Disney World opening special where Julie Andrews dances down Main Street, and they cut over to the Contemporary, and the monorail pulls up and Bob Hope steps out and delivers, a comedic routine kind of christening or opening the Contemporary, and then gets right back on the monorail and off to Magic Kingdom he goes. Well, Tom was in that monorail and trying to help with the live TV feed, and they said they had to cut the air conditioning because it was picking up too much on the mics and they couldn't hear Bob Hope. So then he just, in a panic, powers down the monorail.
The entire monorail.
Just he basically auto shuts it down, and now he's like, I need someone to come restart it. And so he calls someone on the radio. It was just a very comic story. He's like, don't ask why I did this, but I just need you to come to this breaker and turn it on when I say go. And it all seamlessly worked out. He's like, I feel like that was a 1 in a million chance. I would not bet money that we could have ever done that again, but you would have never known from TV, and you don't. And having watched the special, it was just fun to know the chaos that was going on in that, and it would be fun for me to revisit and be like, Tom's in that monorail freaking out.
I think if we had a chance to talk to him, this would be what I want to ask him the most questions about, would be comparing his multiple opening day experiences and seeing especially since Walt Disney World, Magic Kingdom to Epcot to Disneyland Paris, since he was a cast member in those openings, what are things that he did differently or learned from, or are there things that you're always nervous about no matter what, even though he has so much experience, especially by Disneyland Paris? You've opened 2 parks now, but what still goes through your head on an opening? And he said, even though he didn't open, or these were his only opening days, he became known as the guy to open attractions. He talked about he kept getting moved around and he got really good at opening new stuff. So I'd love to ask him, if we had the chance, more about what those lessons are, or what does it mean to open something, and how do you prep for because we have new attractions coming all the time. So what does that look like, opening new parks and new attractions? So speaking of that, though, Courtney, you and I have both worked in the parks. So what about his experience? Because he did spend time in operations before moving more backstage. What about his experience resonated with you?
I appreciated his commitment to guest satisfaction and his ability to recognize that at a young age and doing a job well done. I think those are all the hallmarks of being a cast member, especially one in an onstage role like that. Aside from that, though, as you mentioned, he moved around a lot and he was willing to try new things. Just kind of, he went in the direction that his career took him. He's like, yeah, I'll learn this attraction, or sure, I'll become this manager of different backstage data systems. And that resonated with me because I found parallels in my own journey. I'm someone who had started in the front line, moved to backstage. I changed careers from being in communications to moving to a data analysis type role. So just his resiliency in the face of that, I really admired.
That moving around reminded me a lot of what we hear from Imagineers, cast members, animators who knew Walt, that Walt had this like gift of, even if you didn't realize you were going to be good at this, he saw that in you. So even though Walt only hired him for his first job, he had that mentorship. And that's something that I think still comes through of the Walt Disney Company, is there's this community mentorship that people always end up somewhere that they didn't think they were going to. And they learn new things and they're thriving, or they take those skills that maybe they stayed in one role but then took it to another, and that transference of skills and mentorship and leadership. So that kind of, his journey reminded me a lot of, like, even though Walt wasn't the one being like, oh, I think you would be good actually at monitoring all the food and beverage for Frontierland and Liberty Square after doing monorails and transportation, somehow that came to his plate. So it reminded me of that. What resonated with me, though, which I mentioned, my short time in entertainment, I just admired his commitment, though, to like, I'm going to read the stories and know who my character is, what people are expecting. And then I also resonated with when he said, I think I'm in so many people's photo albums. Because my friend Mickey and I think we're in a lot of photo albums.
I bet.
Even though Mickey only invited me to hang out with him and Donald for about 6 months, we met a lot of guests together, and I can't imagine how many photo albums we're in across the world.
We know that your friend Minnie Mouse is in Stephanie Styles' photo album. Very fun. I love that you had that experience. Overall, I thought this was a fun book of just a lot of different stories and anecdotes. That's really the way, like, very much vignettes that he set up. So we've talked about some of those stories. Was there maybe one that we haven't discussed yet that you'd like to elaborate more on?
I want to talk about Spaceship Earth, because I thought that was so cool. Because it always fascinates me that the entire attraction is in the geodesic sphere. There's not another show building hidden behind a berm or something. It is all in there. And it's amazing. I'm like, how? Because we're going through the attraction. I'm like, I know it's a big sphere, but does it really have this much space in it? And how do you go up and then come back down? And how did they get everything in here? And I liked that he told that story of, he was starting to work warehouse. So when things were coming from California, it was his job then to unload everything, categorize it out, so that then when they're like, oh, we're ready for set 2 or whatever, he had it in the warehouse space, like, oh, it's all in this loading dock area, you may now take it. So he was in charge of all those logistics, which I don't think we get to see very much. So I really liked that aspect of his career and his storytelling, is seeing what's happening behind the scenes, but also some of that chaoticness where they were thinking about putting the show together one way, and then they're like, but we're finishing the sphere, so now we got to put it together backwards and start at the top and work our way down. And so I thought that was really cool, because we haven't really, in our time reading a lot of stuff, we haven't really gone much into Spaceship Earth. So this was a first, like, story for me about the construction of Spaceship Earth versus just what it communicates.
I feel like we got some Epcot with our very first book, Marty Sklar's Dream It, Do It, but you're right, I don't think he went into Spaceship Earth too much. Interesting. No, that's a good one. I'm glad you brought that one up. My choice is about how he found out that he was going to be a Disney legend. I thought that was good. Really cute. So for our listeners, he had retired in 2003, and of course Disneyland turns 50 in 2005. So that celebration kicked off in May of 2005. And I can't remember if this is May or maybe it was July 17th. Like, he was there on the 50th day. I think that's what it was. I think that was very important to him. So he is a Florida resident, but he's like, I'm flying out to California. We're going to be there for the 50th. Of course, he was honored. there with other people who had had a long tenure with the company, but it wasn't the Disney Legend honor. It was just like, let's all celebrate. And I can't remember which other long-term cast member it was. Again, it might have been Dick Nunes. Every secondary person in this book is now Dick Nunes. If you find it, let me know. I see you flipping through the book, but let's just pretend it's Dick
I'll
Nunes.
look.
Dick or whoever says to Tom, like, oh,
Jim Cora.
Oh, Jim Cora. I was way off. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Sorry.
You found that really quick. So yes, Jim Cora says, like, oh, Tom, it was so great to see you. But I'll be seeing you soon at the Disney Legend ceremony in September. And Tom is like, huh? He didn't know. And so all of a sudden he called his sister, who was, I guess, watching his house while he was gone on this trip, and he's like, hey, did an envelope come for me while we were gone? And she's like, oh yeah. She's like, can you open that right now? And it was his letter saying that he would be honored as a Disney Legend. So he kind of found out by accident, because his friend just assumed that he had gotten the same letter, which he did. He just had it arrive while he was on vacation at Disneyland. So I found that to be comical and a cute story.
So another story, though, is the Nabbe Grabber, which it doesn't get a lot of real estate in the book, but he says this is what he's most known for. And as a former cast member myself, and as we've both worked in operations in the parks, you do see them everywhere.
Yes, let's explain what they are for our listeners.
It's like I need them because I'm short. It's a grabber. It's, what do they call them? I can't describe.
It's the Nabbe Grabber. I would describe it as, you have likely seen a non-costume cast member, like a manager, walking around the theme parks, and I might call it a picker. It's a silver
picker-uppers is how he described it.
There we go. To pick up trash or to grab lost items, but yes, it is very much a status symbol among the managers in the operation.
So how this came about was, I was like, why is it named for him? Because like picker-uppers, like those have been around for a while, but he said what made it unique to his design is they needed something to pick things up off the monorail tracks, which have electricity running through them. So they had to change the materials and also the length. So the Nabbe Grabber can expand to 8 feet, and the materials on the end of the grabber they're thicker. It's a bigger claw than a regular picker-upper with like the suction cups, as he described it. And it gives them the ability to reach down into like the monorail tracks if people drop stuff, or like the bays, like if you're loading in the Contemporary and you drop something before the monorail gets there.
Hats.
Yeah, wallets, all sorts of stuff. He's like, oh, it gave them a way to get it immediately to give back to guests and safely because of the electricity. So now those are the ones all used around the parks. I love this quote that he said. I want to read it because it actually made me laugh out loud. If you have grown up in a Catholic household or familiar with Catholic religion, there's a lot of saints. And the patron saint of finding lost things is St. Anthony. So he says, there's one way I'm remembered at the parks, both with the monorails and elsewhere, even today. And that is with those lost items. Yes, in a way, I'm the St. Anthony of Orlando, the patron saint of lost items for Walt Disney World. And that just made me laugh so much. Because my mother, when we lose things, she just starts running around the house going, St. Anthony, St. Anthony. And so I just started laughing because I was like, oh, I'm very familiar with that feeling. So I want to say thank you to Tom Nabbe for perfecting what is now the Nabbe Grabber. Were you familiar with that being named for him?
No, we had one at Space Mountain, and I got to use it because sometimes in people loading the rockets, things would inadvertently fall in between the track. I don't remember anyone calling it that, but it seemed like maybe that was more of a monorail thing, so I should ask somebody that I know in monorails.
I'm trying to remember back to traditions and orientation, because I remember them talking about it was in those moments where we were talking about the 4 keys and show,
keep our area show ready,
and that it's everyone's responsibility regardless of your role, that if you see trash, you should pick it up. You see this. And they mentioned, like, if you see managers, you'll often see us, even though we're not like, we're doing something in the parks for some purpose. We're always carrying one of these things because we're going to pick up trash and we're going to keep everything show ready, even if that's not what we're doing at that moment. So I remember them pointing that out, but I can't remember if they called it a Nabbe Grabber or not, or talked about him.
It's been years. So
it's been a minute since we've gone through traditions.
But it's great to get the history of that because, yes, I agree. They are an iconic. Like, I even before we did our Disney college programs or worked for Disney, my mom and I definitely like picked up like, oh, the managers always have those little picker-upper things. That's a status symbol.
They're always around. And I think he had a picture in here of him with it. I'm trying to, yes. So on page 66, Tom in 2003 with a working Nabbe Grabber. You can see it's a picture of him actually in front of his window on Main Street above the cinema, and he's just holding the Nabbe Grabber. So I was like, that's so great. I love that he included that.
Yeah, a lot of fun, pleasant stories there. So let's get to why we selected him for our series this summer. Tom was inducted as a Disney legend in 2005 in the theme parks and resorts category. I wanted to reread the inscription from the Disney Legend Award sculpture again to remind ourselves and our listeners about the purpose of this award, just in case you didn't listen to our last episode. So it reads, quote, "The Disney Legends Award has 3 distinct elements that characterize the contributions made by each talented recipient. The spiral stands for imagination, the power of an idea. The hand holds the gifts of skill, discipline, and craftsmanship. The wand and the star represent magic and the spark that is ignited when imagination and skill combine to create a new dream." End quote. So, how do you feel that Tom embodies those 3 elements, imagination, skill, and magic?
I really think it is a combination of his entire career with Disney. Magic, I'm going to point to the fact that he embodied Tom Sawyer. I kind of wish we still had some of that kinetic energy also with Tom Sawyer Island, having some characters there, bringing that story to life or something. So I love that he helped people see Tom Sawyer Island as Tom Sawyer, get into that adventure, go fishing in rivers of America. So I think he brought the magic in that sense because people always connect with characters, and that kind of elevates that theme park experience. With skill, I see that managerial skills that he had working in multiple areas of the theme park, opening multiple parks and attractions over the years, and creating a lot of that warehousing system that he brought from Disneyland and then perfected for the needs of Walt Disney World at Epcot. And that imagination, I'm going to go with Nabbe Grabber. He was like, we need something a little bit better. So while it seems so like, didn't that already exist? He's like, no, but we need it to be longer. We need it to have these materials. And look how much that like simple imaginative change is now so ingrained as part of, like we just said, the cast members of Walt Disney World.
I think his statue, instead of a wand, should have had a Nabbe.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing.
A Mickey hand holding a Nabbe Grabber. But yes, I absolutely agree with you. I really did want to pick someone more from the background as we were deciding which of our legends to honor. And, you know, we're sandwiching him between 2 very large stars, Haley Mills last month, and I'll read more about next month, but it is Dame Julie Andrews. But I wanted to get the parks and resorts representation in here, and I feel like he's a good example because he's not necessarily a huge name. Like, it's not like, oh, it's not Marty Sklar. Like, most people who know Imagineering know that. He's not technically wasn't really even a full Imagineer designing the parks. I think he had a close relationship with Imagineering and the cataloging and things he was doing for Epcot's creation, but I felt like this is truly someone who just, what an incredible story. Started at 12 years old, rose up through the ranks, opened multiple parks, and I do think it's really cool that his class of 2005 was directly tied to Disneyland's 50th anniversary, so all of the recipients were related to the Parks and Resorts division or Imagineering, and had some connection to Disneyland. And it does seem like they took the time to they have some big names like Steve Martin, because he started at Disneyland. Art Linkletter did the opening day broadcast, but a lot of it is these Imagineers who had such long tenure between the multiple parks. Jim Cora, who you mentioned, of course, he found out. Chuck Abbott, Charles Boyer, Jack Olson, William Sullivan may not be household names to all Disney fans, so it was important for me to pick this one to tell maybe a lesser known story, but just as deserving of the Disney Legend Award.
And now I want all of our listeners to go around anytime you're in. That should be part of any scavenger hunt now, of, you know how I'm a big fan of scavenger hunts, that when you're in the parks, look for a Nabbe Grabber and think of Tom Nabbe.
Tag us on Instagram.
But he's also unique in some other ways. So he's unique that he's a Disney legend who is also a 55er, a Disneyland 55er. He, I think the criteria is you have to have produced a paycheck to prove you were paid in 1955. And he also has a window on Main Street. So he has a lot of distinctions. So I want to talk about his window. His window is in Walt Disney World above the Main Street Cinema and says Sawyer Fence Painting, Tom Nabbe Proprietor. And with both of these awards, I kind of want us to ponder for a second, do you think one is more prestigious than the other? The window or Disney Legend?
That is tough because I think they're both a big deal. This might be a controversial take, but I feel that the Disney Legend Award, again, all views are my own, the Disney Legend Award is not what it was when it started. I feel like it's become more of a celebrity excuse to have these talents come to the D23 Expo, and they're like, oh, here you go, Christina Aguilera. No real shade to Christina Aguilera, but I don't know that we're going to see the Tom Nabbes of the Disney company ever be honored like this again, because a lot of the most recent class is Christina Aguilera, Robert Downey Jr., Jon Favreau, James Earl Jones, Bette Midler, Kenny Ortega.
Much more the entertainment side.
It is. It really is. There's some. Barnett Ricci, Parks and Resorts. That's the only Parks and Resorts one for 2019. The others were Ming-Na Wen and Hans Zimmer, which, again, several of those are deserving, but I feel like it has become more about the film and television and the recognizing of it. So personally, I feel like for somebody in the company, when you have a window on Main Street, I'm assuming that's forever. That's a big deal. If I had to pick which one I would want a window on Main Street.
I think I'm going to have to agree with you. I think both are super prestigious. I think given the class that he was a part of, especially in 2005 with the 50th anniversary, in an interview I heard from him, he said he got his window first, 2003, and then 2 years later, the Disney Legends Award. So in an interview, he had said that he thought the window was going to be the icing on the cake, but then Disney Legend comes around and he's like absolutely flabbergasted that he was considered. But as a parks person, I think I'm gonna have to agree with you on the window, because think of how many people stop and read those every day, but they don't. Legends Plaza, especially for Florida goers like us, is nowhere near us. So you're not going to see all of those names all of the time. But yeah, looking at the windows on Main Street, they catch everyone's attention and might spark an imagination, if you will, to be like, oh, who is that person?
I also think it's amazing that he was like, I want a window as my retirement.
Yes.
I'm like, good for him. Like, dude worked 48 years for the company, and his leader was like, what do you want us to do for you? He's like, I want a window. And they're like, we need to check if that's okay. And then Marty Sklar and all signed off, like, yeah, this dude deserves a window. So you, like, some people might scoff and that, be like, oh, well, he asked for it. But like, no, sometimes you need to speak up for what you want and you think that you're entitled to, and he absolutely was. So good for you, Tom.
And I think it's a full circle too of his story of becoming Tom Sawyer, that he pestered Walt Disney for a year to get that. So he said when he saw Walt after Dick Nunes had said, you should ask for that job, he's like, he might have been joking, but he, as a 12, 13-year-old, you just walked up to the boss, to Walt Disney, and said, I think you should hire me. That takes a lot of gumption and a lot of guts to do that.
Emily,
and
that is a great observation. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I find that so profound. Like, that was a wonderful connection that you made to bookend his career.
So then at the end, he's like, I've done a lot. I've put in almost 50 years here, and he spanned a lot of parts of the company, from entertainment with Tom Sawyer to parks and resorts and logistics and so many things. That, yeah, I think he's super deserving. I believe each award is unique. I do believe there is a place for the Disney Legend Award. It's a little bit more encompassing. It allows us to recognize multiple parts of the Walt Disney Company and its many subsidiaries. But yeah, I do love that the windows remain very unique to the resorts.
I like what they picked for his window. It's very fitting for Sawyer fence painting, because we did forget to share that he helped open Tom Sawyer Island at Walt Disney World when that came to Magic Kingdom in 1973. And Charles Ridgway, who did the introduction or foreword to this book, really just, he's a publicity guy. We should really read his book at some point. I read that years ago before we did our podcast, and it's really good. So shelving that for a future episode. He has amazing stories, but he was a great storyteller. He was a great newsman, and he really leaned into the, like, you were Tom Sawyer, we're gonna make that a great feature in an article. And so they had him pose for photos helping to construct or paint Tom Sawyer Island at Walt Disney World. They even forced him to wear a straw hat. They got that on him. So I liked that they really leaned into the Tom Sawyer roots, but it's something that spanned both coasts, so it still felt fitting for its placement at Walt Disney World.
So can't recommend these stories enough. So listeners, if you have not read Tom Nabbe's From Disneyland's Tom Sawyer to Disney Legend, highly suggest. It's a great, like we said, short read if you're heading to the beach, or maybe you want to read this right before you go to your next Disneyland or Walt Disney World trip, something to kind of get you pumped up. I love doing that before going on a trip, and it's something that's very manageable, and you'll see a lot of his influence in the parks immediately as soon as you get there, especially with that Nabbe Grabber. But if you're looking for other things to catch your interest about Tom Nabbe, we always have additional resources.
Yes, we always love our additional resources, so I'm going to point our listeners to one that may be familiar to them, as I can't recommend it enough, and that is our podcast pal Dan Heaton's The Tomorrow Society podcast. Episode 73 features an interview with Tom Nabbe. The episode is called Disney Legend Tom Nabbe on Opening Epcot Center, Managing the Monorail, and Being Hired by Walt Disney. So if you'd like to hear a lot of these stories in Tom's own words and own voice, in addition to, of course, reading them, Dan always does great interviews, so highly recommend that one.
And I'm going to point us to Disney Plus, to Behind the Attraction, episode 9. They had an entire episode on trains, trams, and monorails. So if you want to have more of an understanding of what the monorails do for the resorts, I think it's a great place to start since he works so much in transportation. But also, if you have not read The Adventures of Tom Sawyer or The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, I'm going to add those to our suggested reading as well, because Walt loved those books. There's a reason he picked Tom Sawyer Island and personally designed Tom Sawyer Island himself. And maybe if we add those to our reading list, Courtney, if we revisit them, maybe we'll have a little bit more of an understanding of Tom Sawyer Island and its role in the theme park.
And it's a great excuse to revisit Tom and Huck with JTT.
Yeah, so, let's go. 90s nostalgia. We're here for it.
Putting that on the to-be-read pile for sure. But you can join us in August for our final entry in the Legendary Summer Series, Homework, a Memoir of My Hollywood Years by Dame Julie Andrews. And here is a description from Amazon. In Home, the #1 New York Times international bestseller, Julie Andrews recounted her difficult childhood and her emergence as an acclaimed singer and performer on the stage. With this second memoir, Homework, a memoir of my Hollywood years, Andrews picks up the story with her arrival in Hollywood and her phenomenal rise to fame in her earliest years. Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music, Andrews describes her years in the film industry from the incredible highs to the challenging lows. Not only does she discuss her work in now classic films and her collaborations with giants of cinema and television, she also unveils her personal story of adjusting to a new and often daunting world, dealing with the demands of unimaginable success, being a new mother, the end of her first marriage, embracing 2 stepchildren, adopting 2 more children, and falling in love with the brilliant and mercurial Blake Edwards. The pair worked together in numerous films, including Victor Victoria, the gender-bending comedy that garnered multiple Oscar nominations. Co-written with her daughter Emma Walton Hamilton and told with Andrews' trademark charm and candor, Homework takes us on a rare and intimate journey into an extraordinary life that is funny, heart-tendering, and inspiring, end quote. So, very much looking forward to that next month. But of course, in the meantime, you can keep up with Book of the Mouse Club on Twitter and Instagram at Book of the Mouse. Email us with questions or ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. Please be sure to leave us a review on iTunes so others may find our podcast and read and listen along with us. You can keep up with me, Courtney, on Instagram at Great Gutsby and on Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
And you can follow me, Emily, on Instagram and Twitter at the same handle at Emily_McD.
Wonderful. Well, since it is just the two of us and I did the quote last time, I believe it is your turn for the closing quote. Emily, what have you selected for us?
So in honor of Tom Nabbe's first official role at Disneyland, I actually did turn to The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. This quote reminded me of Tom Nabbe's pursuit of bigger and better things for himself throughout his Disney career, and it also reminded me of the spirit of Tom Sawyer Island in childhood. So here is from The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Quote, "There comes a time in every rightly constructed boy's life when he has a raging desire to go somewhere and dig for hidden treasure." End quote. So the next time you hop on monorail to the Magic Kingdom, I hope we all think of Tom Nabbe and don't skip Tom Sawyer's Ireland and enjoy the adventure.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next month. Book of the Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.